Please welcome to the stage, Dean Karen Yarhi-Milo.
Hello. Good afternoon, and welcome to Columbia University. I'm Karen Yarhi-Milo. I'm the Dean of the School of International and Public Affairs and the Adlai E. Stevenson Professor of International Relations and co-founder of the Institute of Global Politics. It is an honor to open this global convening on child marriage, hosted by the Women's Initiatives at the Institute of Global Politics and co-hosted by the Center for Global Development. We are at a pivotal moment in the global fight against child marriage. Every year, 12 million girls are married before they reach adulthood. Their futures determined before they have the power to decide for themselves. And yet, progress is possible. Over the last 25 years, the global share of girls married before 18 has fallen from 25% to 20%. This progress reflects sustained advocacy, smart policy, and real investment. These gains, however, they are fragile, especially in a world marked by rising conflict, economic strain, and wavering commitments to women's rights. Child marriage is an assault on human dignity. The report that the Institute of Global Policy is releasing today makes clear that ending child marriage is not aspirational, but achievable if we are willing to act. Our report provides an actionable strategy with a particular focus on increasing investment in girls' education, expanding access to reproductive health services to reduce adolescent pregnancy, and shifting social norms that perpetuate child marriage. So before I introduce today's speakers, I want to recognize the people, important people, whose remarkable leadership made this work possible. First and foremost, I want to extend my deep gratitude to Sheryl Sandberg. Her early and unwavering support of the IGP's Women's Initiative made this report and today's event possible. Sheryl, thank you. Thank you for your vision. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for your support, advancing opportunities for women and girls worldwide. I am grateful for the IGP Women's Initiative and the incredible co-directors of this initiative, Rachel Vogelstein and Jennifer Klein. Their leadership is nothing but remarkable, brilliant, and also today in authoring this report, this important report. The Women's Initiative was created to produce research and practical policy solutions to advance women's rights and opportunities in the United States and around the world. This report is a powerful expression of that mission. And here is the report that I hope you will all pick up a copy. We are also grateful to our partners at the Center for Global Development for their economic analysis of the cost of inaction. This report's findings were also informed by the Global Child Marriage Advisory Group. It's a distinguished group of leaders and experts on child marriage from the Global North and the Global South who have contributed research, field exposure, and insights from their own work over the past 6 months to guide this report. Many of these experts are part of the program, either in person today or virtually, and I want to thank the advisory group's co-chair, Mabel van Oranje. Where's Mabel? Nice to meet you. Nice to. Who has joined, who's here in person, and also we have Memory Banda is she joining us, I think, virtually today, and we are grateful for your expertise and for your help and your partnership writing this report. Thank you. I, of course, want to thank the entire team at IGP and SIPA for their work on this report, really remarkable report, and today's event. It really takes a village, and I appreciate that. Last, but certainly not least, I want to take this special moment here with all of you to share some exciting news. Anyone who has been to any Women's Initiative program has heard me mention over and over again one name, Ann Kaplan. Ann Kaplan, a trustee emerita, she provided the seed investment that launched this initiative and allowed us to hire our lead faculty. A few months ago, her family made a transformative gift commitment to endow the initiative. Now, I am beyond thrilled to share that over the weekend, the trustees formally approved the permanent naming of the Ann F. Kaplan Women's Initiative. Thank you, Robert and Andrew and the family. Please stay tuned in the coming weeks for a formal announcement and opportunity to celebrate Ann's incredible impact here at SIPA and Columbia. The leaders we've gathered today reflect what this moment demands: sustained commitment across government, multilateral institution, philanthropy, and civil society. Our first panel, moderated by Ali Rogan, anchor of PBS NewsHour, will examine the cost of inaction on child marriage. We are joined by Rachel Glenister, and president of the Center for Global Development, Faith Mwangi Powell, CEO of Girls Not Brides, and Catherine Russell, executive director of UNICEF. We will then hear a spotlight conversation between Sheryl Sandberg and her Excellency Dr. Fatima Maada Bio, and the First Lady of Sierra Leone, where is the First Lady? Here you go. Thank you so much for your leadership, for your partnership, for everything that you do, and we're really grateful that you're with us today. The First Lady of Sierra Leone, whose Hands Off Our Girls campaign has driven tangible progress against early marriage and gender-based violence in Sierra Leone. This is really remarkable, important work. Our second panel, moderated by Rachel Vogelstein, will focus on the way forward, and here we're joined in person by Lucy Kluva, a professor at Oxford University and a leader in evidence-based interventions for children and adolescents, and Nayana Chowdhury, CEO of Breakthrough. And we are also joined virtually by Obi Ezekwesili, a founder of Human Capital Africa, and Rebecca Guillaume, founder of the Machista Initiative. Mesichana Initiative. That is my apologies. And an internationally recognized advocate for girls' education and legal reform. And thank you so much for joining us today. We will conclude with closing remarks from Mabel Oranje, global champion of Girls Not Brides, and a driving force behind the global movement to end child marriage. So this is really a lot that we will be trying to cover today, and this is such an important thing that we're trying to look at this from various perspectives and cover so much ground, because this work is really important. It is now my distinct pleasure to welcome to the stage my friend and partner, SIPA's own Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton. Yay! She is, yes. She is is the 67th Secretary of State, former senator from New York, and professor of practice here at Columbia. Thank you so much for your leadership, for everything that you do on the rights of women and girls worldwide. As we all know, the famous declaration, and I will let you do the honor, women's rights are human rights. And today, she's always the biggest champion and continues to be one of the most influential advocates for women and girls across the globe. It is my distinct honor to invite her to the stage. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Karen, and thanks to all of you for being here for this really important event. I think you'll agree when you hear the panelists who have such a breadth and depth of experience and expertise, and the report, which is truly groundbreaking. I want to thank, obviously, everyone who worked on this report, starting with Rachel Vogelstein and Jen Klein. I want to thank Sheryl Sandberg for her commitment to this issue and for her support of this effort. Mabel, thank you, because you've been on the front lines for years. The Center for Global Development was a great partner because we looked at this not only as a human rights abuse, but as an economic issue. And I think that's a new way of trying to focus this issue so that more countries and multilateral institutions and others can be aware of what this is costing when 12 million girls under the age of 18 get married every year. If you haven't seen the moving photographs, one of which is on the cover of the 15-year-old bride with the 32-year-old groom, be sure to look at the works that Stephanie Sinclair, founder of Too Young to Wed, has presented in the exhibit and allowed us to use in the report. And so many partners and champions. I just want to add a few words to what Karen said in introduction to this. You know, I can imagine there may be some who are saying, why are you holding an event and issuing a report about child marriage when the world is on fire? You're in the middle of an expanding war in the Middle East. You have a continuing war in Ukraine. You have all kinds of instability and unpredictability from Latin America to East Asia. So why are you talking about child marriage? What kind of an issue is that? You should be talking about the really important matters that are happening in the world today. And my response to that is, when you study international relations, if you are in an academic role or a practitioner role, you need to keep your eye on both the headlines and the trend lines. The headlines, of course, they focus our attention. But don't forget the trend lines. And don't forget to drink your water. So, no, let me now introduce our first video before I lose my voice. I have been talking a lot lately. And this is a video introduction from Dr. Samra Zafar. Thank you all.
Introducing Dr. Samra Zafar, founder of Brave Beginnings.
My mom came into my room and she casually announced, Samra, you have a marriage proposal and you're going to be getting married in a few months. I didn't have any say in the matter. And over the next few weeks and months, everybody was preparing for my wedding while I was just sitting alone, feeling terrified and crying in silence. The voices around me were so loud that the voice inside me just drowned in comparison. I was sitting in this big, grand banquet hall, decked up in red and gold, beside a man who was 11 years older than me, who I had never met before, and who was now my husband. For years, I was being abused without even realizing it. At first, those bruises were on my soul, and eventually, those bruises appeared on my body as well. There is an inherent power imbalance that comes with a child marriage, and that is what makes abuse almost inevitable. Child marriage is not tradition. It is the removal of consent. Child marriage is about control. It's about power. my outcome is an anomaly. The fact that I'm sitting here today, being able to speak about this, being able to have had an education, becoming a doctor, that is rare. No child should lose her future before she can even understand it.
Welcome to the stage, Rachel Glenister, Faith Mwangi Powell, Catherine Russell, and moderator Ali Rogan.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's my pleasure to moderate this first panel of this very, very important event. There's an old adage that a problem well stated is a problem half solved. And that is what we're going to talk about in this first panel. We're going to talk about the scale and scope of this problem and the many challenges that lead to child marriage and contribute to its persistence. Catherine, I'd like to start with you.
Okay.
UNICEF, together with the United Nations Population Fund, leads UN efforts to combat child marriage, working in high prevalence countries in Africa, the Middle East, South Asia. Let's talk about the latest data that exists that shows us the scale, the prevalence of child marriage, and how it affects not only the lives of individual girls, but also entire families and communities.
Yeah. Well, it is a pernicious practice for sure. I think the Dean and Secretary Clinton gave some indication of the scale, which is roughly 650 million people alive today were child brides at some point. And every year we see another 12 million girls subjected to this, mostly in South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa, but not only. What we know is that progress is possible, and we have seen that, and I think the Dean mentioned this as well. It went from a quarter of girls to now a fifth of girls suffering this. So we can address this problem, but it's a really big and complex issue to address because it's not one thing. It's not passing laws or changing ideas. It's a combination of things. And I think when you look at the challenges, it's mostly, I would say, driven by two things. One is poverty, where families see very limited opportunities, and they think that marrying off girls is going to help the girls sometimes, help the families. You see it a lot in conflict settings, unstable situations where sometimes they're trying to protect girls. So it's a big, challenging thing to address. I have seen just horrific stories. I mean, you got a little taste of that from the last speaker. I was in South Sudan recently, and I met several young women who were telling me their stories. And it wasn't actually even an event on child marriage. It was just more talking about people who had fled violence. And one young woman said to me, you know, for years, all I could think about was I wanted to kill myself to get out of the situation I was in. And that's the kind of story you hear over and over again. So I think the bad news is there are so many girls who are subjected to this. The good news is we do know how to address it. You mentioned UNICEF's work with UNFPA. You know, we are making progress for sure, and we do have a good idea of what to do, but it's going to take a lot of committed work by a lot of people to continue the progress.
And I wonder if I can put you on the spot a little bit. When you're doing these travels, do you hear from other community leaders who may not themselves be survivors or victims of child marriage, but have seen the ravages and what it does to their communities?
Oh, sure. I mean, it's interesting because a lot of times the people who can be most compelling in their telling of the stories are fathers who will say, look, I didn't realize, you know, this is the way it was done in this community, but when my daughter came to me, or, I think you're going to have Memory Banda speak later, and she'll tell the story, I'm sure, of how her sister got married early, but she appealed to her community to say, can you please stop this? So I think there is an awareness sometimes that this is really a terrible practice. But as I said, it's a complicated thing to try to address because in some cases, and I would say in many cases, and Mabel, I don't know if you agree with this, but I think in many cases, parents are doing what they think is good for their children. It's not always the case, but it happens often enough that you have to think about, okay, these children are living in poverty, their families are living in poverty, they don't have easy answers. They need social protection systems. They most importantly need to stay in school. But that's not always easy either, right? Because sometimes secondary schools aren't available, or it's dangerous to walk to the secondary school, or it's dangerous when they get to the secondary school, or they have fees and they can't pay it. So, I mean, I don't mean to make it sound like it's impossible because it's not. It is possible to deal with it, but it's not easy.
Faith, I'd like to ask you now, this report highlights the causes of child marriage and its ramifications, including poor health and illiteracy, which fuel an intergenerational cycle of poverty that becomes difficult to break. Your organization, Girls Not Brides, works with a coalition of local partners around the world fighting child marriage. What are the effects, from your perspective, of this practice on communities, and why is action so urgent now?
Thank you for that question, and thank you all for coming. You could have chosen to be anywhere. We're in New York after all, so thank you for being here. And this is important, and I want to say, Madam Secretary, that I agree with you that there is a war going on, but there is a silent war going on every day in the lives of girls. And we need to really think about that, and that is why it's important that we are sitting here and not sitting elsewhere. When we think about communities, some of the things which really affect communities, and you think child marriage is an issue, education loss. If you think how many girls really miss opportunities to go to school, how many girls will never sit in a room such as this one because they never got the opportunity. I always say I grew up in rural Kenya, and I always pinch myself when I'm sitting in a room like this because I know there are many girls where I came from who will never have a chance to sit in a room like this. And I feel honored that I was able to go to school. So communities lose that. They lose skilled workers. And even governments, they lose billions of money. As we were coming here, we were talking with you. And I was saying, I just Googled and I said, Nigeria loses about $10 billion a year from lost income for girls who are married. Because those are people who could be in productive work. There are health risks as well. When girls are married early, they get pregnant early, then maternal health, child mortality, all those issues really get very complicated. We have even seen girls dying, and we have seen that. There's actually a big film showing, called Now, is showing how girls really die, and nobody really talks about them because it's a forgotten issue. There is, of course, the intergenerational poverty, because sometimes child marriage is underpinned by poverty. And when girls get married at that age, they have no skills, they have no education. It's likely that that poverty cycle is perpetuated, that their children will also get married young. And so that cycle of poverty are some of the things which really affect communities. But as Catherine said, sometimes parents don't go thinking they are doing the wrong thing. They're trying to solve a problem, but perhaps not solving it the right way. And we have seen the communities themselves. I always give a message of hope, because we have seen communities themselves really coming up and saying we want something different for our daughters. We want our daughters to experience a different life. We want our daughters to sit as rooms like this. And that, for me, gives me hope. Even in the midst when we have 12 million girls getting married every year, we have, in the last decade, we have 68 million girls. And if we don't do anything, we are at risk of having 70 million girls getting married by 2030. And right now, there is no country, absolutely no country, which is on track to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. So we are failing as we speak. And we have 4 years to go, and we are failing. If this was an exam, nobody will pass, because we are letting our girls down, and we are letting communities down. But for me, the critical thing is partnership with government, with communities, with girls themselves, so that they can talk about their own experiences and what they need.
Can I ask you to speak briefly to the state of cooperation with governments right now? We're obviously in periods where funding is shrinking, not growing.
Yeah.
How is that affecting the work that you are doing?
That actually has been a big challenge. There are so many financial cuts across the world. Everybody right now, the biggest priority is security, and governments are cutting their budget so that money can be directed to security, and are more for security. We won't need to be safe, but our girls are not safe either. So we need to really balance that. So when we lose that, and we are seeing governments, even from here, the US started it, if I can be bold to say that. And it has kind of become almost like dominoes, like other countries are cutting their own budgets. And what is happening is that the work on the ground is not happening. There are so many organizations every day who are closing. There are so many people every day who are losing their jobs, people who are doing really great work. And that is a challenge because this is not an issue. And I love this report because this is not an issue we can solve without money. We need money. This report says we need 1.3 billion every year to end child marriage. And I think the last time we had 60 million. That is not going to solve this problem. And we need to rise up and we need to partner and we need to really talk to whoever we need to talk to, that in the midst of all these other issues which are happening in the world, and the world is in a very strange place right now. We wake up every day not knowing what is going to happen tomorrow. But there are many girls waking up today not knowing what is going to happen tomorrow too. So we cannot forget that.
You cited the number in billions that is required to address this problem accurately. Rachel, I want to follow up on that and ask about the analysis in this report, which the Center for Global Development was a partner in producing, that demonstrates the staggering cost of inaction on this issue. Losses of up to $175 billion per year, or almost $2.5 trillion by 2040, totally eclipsing the number needed to address it. The analysis also shows that the cost of inaction far exceeds the funding required to reduce it. Can you walk us through this analysis? Why is the practice of child marriage so costly to communities and economies, and why is investing in programs to end it so economically important?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been great to partner with SIPA and this team on this report. And I should acknowledge Kehinde Ajay, who did a lot of the work here. So thank you, Kehinde. Marriage is one of the biggest financial decisions that we make in our lives. We don't always think of it as a financial decision, but it is. And for often these girls, it's not their decision, but it's still a big financial decision of their parents often. So we shouldn't be that surprised that child marriage has a lot of economic causes, a lot of economic consequences, but fortunately also a lot of economic solutions. So this report, we focus a lot on the economic consequences, but hopefully we can get into some of the solutions and the causes too. So first is education, which you've heard a little bit about, which is that all around the world, when girls go into unions or to marriage, they almost always have to drop out of school. Now, I know there's important work going on in Sierra Leone to reduce that, but it still is a factor that that girls usually have to drop out of school when they're married. There's just kind of social barriers. Plus, you have all the housework to do. Your mother-in-law wants you to do all the work, and you have a baby on the way, and so it's very hard to keep on in school. And that reduces economic productivity and earnings in the future. And so think of that over the whole of a woman's life. Every year of education, you earn 8% less, and you're less productive, right? So that accumulates a lot over your lifetime. The second big cause, and together we estimate that means that we're losing $45 billion a year because of that lost future productivity because girls have had to drop out of school. The second big effect comes from health consequences. Now, this is particularly important for girls who get married for the worst forms of child marriage, right? When women are getting married girls are getting married at the age of 15, 14, 13. Right, their bodies are simply not mature enough to have a child. And yet they very rapidly often become mothers, and so you've got a child having a child. And this is made even worse because a lot of the places where there's child marriage, there's malnutrition and stunting. And so when I did this work in Bangladesh, on child marriage, and I was interviewing a lot of girls for this research, I was looking at them and thinking, you can't be 16. Like, you look 13 or 12 because a third of our sample were stunted, right? So their bodies were smaller. So just imagine then, those of us who've gone through childbirth, going through that with a young girl's body, right? So this is associated with higher child mortality, with maternal mortality and other health consequences. And so we estimate the cost of that is 130 billion a year. 130 billion a year. Obviously, that's an economic number to an absolute tragedy, right? In terms of losses of a child or of a mother. But I do want to say that there's an upside to this, which is because there are so many economic factors in driving this, and there are economic consequences, there are also some economic solutions too.
Well, let's talk about that quickly. I know we're going to look forward in our next panel a lot more, but when you think about the cost-benefit of analysis in investing in programs to stop this, it seems like the upside is just tremendous.
Yeah, and I should say, I mean, done some work on the cost effectiveness, like how much benefit do you get from investing in reducing child marriage? And the best programs, not all programs, but the best programs in this area mean that you get $2 back for every dollar that you put in. And that's because girls, don't drop out of school and you get these returns. So, I mean, in Bangladesh, a project that I worked with Save the Children on, we provided a small financial incentive to parents if they had an unmarried adolescent girl in the family. Why did we do that? Why a financial incentive? Well, the cost of dowry goes up with age. So they have to raise more and more money as they keep the girl in school. Have to pay for her to go to school, but they also have to save more for dowry. So we gave this incentive that offset that increase in dowry. Child marriage fell by 25%.
Wow. And
the return to that was, as they say, $2.50 for every dollar invested. So, there are some good solutions. I'm now working with BRAC, who are interested in scaling this up.
Fascinating. Catherine, I'd like to ask about the other major factor in contributing to some of the backsliding we've seen in investment in these issues and focus on them, which is COVID, which I know UNICEF has collected a lot of data on. It disrupted education, heightened vulnerability to child marriage, and it means that after almost 2 decades of seeing child marriage rates decline, this progress was interrupted and in some cases reversed. When you consider that on top of global funding cuts for child marriage, how are these setbacks affecting what you're seeing in the field?
Yeah, no, it's worrying for sure. I think the way we would look at COVID is it was a really important example of a tremendous shock to the system. And it meant that, first of all, the economies were decimated in so many places. So many girls were out of school, so they were more vulnerable. Families didn't have resources, so they were more likely to get their girls married. But these kinds of shocks continue. I mean, we see a lot of climate shocks, right? Where I was in the Sahel, and families literally have nothing. They have no way to support themselves, and so girls are much more vulnerable. You see conflict where girls are incredibly vulnerable. In some cases, parents want to marry their girls because they think they're more susceptible to sexual violence in a conflict, which is often true. Girls are displaced, right? They're on the move. Their families are on the move. Again, more vulnerable. So any kind of shock like that makes it much more difficult for children who are already kind of on the edge, right? These are children who already are vulnerable because they're often poor. They live in vulnerable situations, and then a big shock like that makes it much worse. So that's kind of the nature of the business that we're working in. The budget cuts have been challenging. UNICEF, we're about an $8 billion a year organization. We took a 20% cut, and that has dramatic impact on the people, the children that we serve all around the world. And I think Faith was saying this too. The United States started, right? And the United States made the cuts for ideological reasons. So that's one thing. The Europeans have largely followed, not for ideological reasons, but really because they're shifting money to defense. Maybe that's an ideology, but it's different, right? It's because they're sort of seeing these budget constraints. So for us, it means, okay, we've got to look more broadly for partnerships and try to figure out how to work together. For UNICEF, we see our job is really empowering governments to do the work. They are the duty bearers to their public, to their children. And so when you read the good work that they're doing in Sierra Leone, that's what you want. You want political leadership in a country, and then you want the international organizations and all the others to come in behind and try to be supportive and try to work together. There's a lot of effort to bring the private sector in more fully. Child marriage is not a place usually where you see the private sector coming in. They're not all that interested in it, but it's not impossible to do for sure. And I think the key to it is for people to see the continuum, which is you want children to be born healthy, you want them to be educated, get decent nutrition, get immunized, get to school, and then move into skills, right? And if you can do that and you can show that continuum, then the private sector sees that at the end of this journey, if children and young people are educated, skilled, and healthy, they're more likely to be good workers or consumers. So it's possible to get the private sector in, but I think we need to do more work in that space.
Faith, this report underscores all of the current challenges that increase the risks of child marriage. There's the pandemic, as we just discussed, the risk of rising conflict around the world, the growing effects of climate change, which you've been highlighting for a very long time. All of these can increase the risk of gender-based violence, including child marriage. How are all of these issues increasing risks of child marriage on the ground, and how should policymakers respond?
That's a great question, and especially now that we are in some sort of war, I think what I've seen is that these things increase vulnerabilities for girls. For example, we have seen that even across the world, the countries which have the highest prevalence of child marriage are in humanitarian crisis. Mm-hmm. It's because the structures which protect girls are destroyed. They are not able to go to school. I always say education is really the closest thing to a silver bullet to end child marriage. But if a girl is not even able to go to school, the moment she hangs around the house, there's only so much she can do. The next stage is child marriage. So it's very important that we know that this humanitarian crisis really increase the vulnerabilities, increase risk, and we even see, when there are floods, you see schools being closed. The people who are most affected are the girls, because they are staying home. So these things are really important to think about. And why government needs to respond is because to provide safety nets. We have been advocating for coordination of cash transfers because poverty is the greatest risk. When the households are displaced, when people are displaced, then they are even pushed in further poverty. So providing cash transfers so that girls can go to school or can even have food to eat. It doesn't matter, whatever is needed, if that can be provided, that is what we are asking governments to be able to do. We see government as critical partners, as allies. I think these are not the days where we point to governments. We actually say, can we do this together? And I cannot emphasize more the work which is happening in Sierra Leone, because that is the leadership we need in the countries, because they are the ones who can provide the policy safety net, the legal safety net, the system safety net, which then protect girls. Because that really, and we have seen it in the world is not getting safer, the world is actually getting worse. And as it gets worse, whether it's climate change, whether it's conflict, whether it's refugee status, whatever is happening, the people who bear the brunt of some of these crises are the girls themselves. And they are seen as burdens when they hang around. And parents also don't want the girls to stay at home and get pregnant, because teenage pregnancy is another thing which really drives child marriage, because parents are afraid if you get pregnant, nobody will want you. So it's better to marry you before you get into teenage pregnancy. So the complexities of child marriage are multifaceted. There are so many complexities. Sometimes I look at these young girls and I think, the life you are in is a web of complexities which really don't even point you to success. Mm-hmm. It points you to failure, and it's up to us to safeguard these girls so that they can really have scope or even have an opportunity to succeed. I always say, I grew up in a village, and I know how hard it is to grow in a village. I know how tough it is, and you have to have somebody really advocating for you to really know that you are worth somebody. And if it wasn't for my own father, I wouldn't be sitting in this room. But my father believed that I deserved to go to school. And we all went to school. My neighbors did not go to school. And if we don't have that, there is no opportunity for these girls, because the intersectionality of the things they are facing are humongous. Is that a word? Yeah, huge. Humongous, yeah? Yeah. So these are crises. To me, the bottom line is to say these crises, as they come, they just increase the vulnerabilities of already vulnerable girls. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can you tell me about how difficult it is to address all of that intersectionality that you were talking about at the same time? Like, how do you manage that in the work that you do?
I think I'll say what Mabel says to us all the time, because she's been a champion a long time. She says this issue is a multisectoral, it's a multi-stakeholder, and it's a multi-system. This is not an issue you can do alone. This is an issue you have to identify. Who are the partners working on climate? Who are the partners working on food security? Who are the people working on education? Who are the people working on reproductive health rights? That's why we have a movement, the End Child Marriage movement, because this movement is an ecosystem for diverse actors addressing child marriage from multifaceted areas, because it's not one single solution. We want a law, but a law alone is not enough. We want to address social norms alone is not enough. We want to address education alone is not enough. We want food, we want this. It's finding the people who are doing all these things and coming together. What I like about this issue is that this is not an issue of ego. It's an issue of saying, what can I bring to the table? And what can you bring, and how can we do it together? Government, leaders, girls, everybody. It's an issue for everybody. This is not about power. It's about community. And the moment we work as community, as a movement, as an ecosystem, we win. If we divide and you think I'm going to pull over there and you pull over there, we fail. So if there is a message I want to give you today as you leave, let's build community. Because together, that is how we succeed. Because it's such a complex issue that it's not one solution, it's multiple solutions, it's multiple people, it's lots of money, and we need lots and lots and lots of money. So again, another message, if you know somebody who is so rich, they have some extra money to give, this is the place to give it. This is the issue to give it to. So I'm seeing some very smart looking people. You must know some people with big bags. So please talk to them and tell them there is an issue we need to deal with. If you leave that here with that, we start to win. Thank you.
Thank you, Faith. I think this is a good segue to Rachel, this question for you, which is that this report really quantifies the decline in child marriage funding we've seen over the past few years. You've done very important work in your own research, especially in ending child marriage in Bangladesh. Given the cost that this practice imposes on economies around the world, why isn't it higher on the economic development agenda? And what arguments do you think are the most effective in persuading skeptical policymakers, funders, other decision makers to prioritize this issue at a time when budgets are tight and only getting tighter?
Yeah, so, okay, if I had a magic few words to say to policymakers to solve this, I would have said them by now. But anyway, but I do think there's hope here, because I think one of the issues has been that people assume that child marriage would go away when we saw countries get richer. They just thought, oh, as they develop, it's all going to go away. Or they thought, well, it's cultural, and I'm a Minister of Finance, and I kind of can't do the social norms, cultural stuff. Well, both of those are wrong. I'm not saying it's not, norms aren't important, but I am saying it hasn't always gone away with development. And I'll come back and give an example of Bangladesh again, but also that there are things that you can do even when you don't change norms. So let me talk about, again, my experience in Bangladesh is, since I've been working there and tracking actually girls some of whom we successfully delayed marriage for, the income per head there has more than doubled. And yet we haven't seen anything like that progress on child marriage. So we've seen some progress, but not really dramatic. And the second thing that I really noticed is, even at the beginning when I talked to a lot of families, they were aware due to, the good efforts of microcredit organizations and others. They understood the costs of child marriage. They understood the health costs. They understood that their girl would lose education. They wanted her to stay in education, and yet it was still happening. So this is, it turns out that there were all these financial pressures and these complicated pressures on them that led them to, not want to have their child marry, but that they ended up in that position. They got a good offer. They thought, well, maybe there's the risk that, there'll be some bad rumor about her that she was seen talking to a boy, or also this is a good match and maybe another good one won't come along again. So again, I agree with you that often parents don't want this to happen and have the best interests of their child, but there are these forces that are pushing them that way. And the incentive worked partly because people got the image that if you stayed in school, you must be an ambitious woman. And therefore, to signal that you weren't an ambitious woman, you married earlier, and therefore you got a lower dowry because you were seen as, a compliant woman, right? So that's why a tiny incentive. And when they got the incentive, you know what the girls did and the parents did? They said, oh, we were just waiting because we got an incentive. They had an excuse and they used that. We saw women in other villages use that excuse that they didn't marry early and they would still be a good bride, even though they didn't get the incentive. They said, oh, no, we just stayed in school because we were being paid for it. So they were like signaling. They're very smart, very smart. But it does show you this complexity of the issue that, more educated girls, I mean, we know it in this country, right? More educated girls, you might be seen as, a little bit more pushy, and therefore maybe you're less attractive. And so there is that tension that girls come across. But when it's a big financial, dowry at stake, you have to pay more. So, we had this clever way of allowing them to stay in school without signaling that they were pushy. Anyway, but let me talk about some of the other things that we can do to show. So I think it's important for policymakers to see there's something you can do. You get high returns from it. What are some of the things? Job opportunities for girls. Actually, around garment factories in Bangladesh, there is lower child marriage. Why? Because parents see that she can have a good job. You may not think working in a garment factory is a good job. These families think it's a good job, right? So you see lower child marriage because they invest in their girls because they can have an economic future. So that's something that we can get governments excited about. Education, closest thing to a silver bullet, I agree. Getting children to stay in school. We can get governments to invest more in education of girls, and we're seeing that. So that there isn't a huge amount of money coming from governments for specific child marriage programs, but they are getting the point that they are getting a return from women going to school. And girls' clubs in Africa have proved to be an extremely cost-effective way to reduce child marriage. So we talked about these crises. I was in Sierra Leone during the Ebola outbreak. There were life skills clubs happening, run by BRAC throughout the country. And the girls there, when schools closed down, they had somewhere else to go. And they did not. Do you remember the wave of pregnancies that happened after Ebola because the schools were closed? It was terrible, right? And that's part of the reason you got involved. Well, with these girls' clubs where girls could go, even during a crisis where they felt safe, they did not get anything. There were far fewer teenage pregnancies, and therefore they were able to go back to school after the end of the crisis. Wow. So some practical solutions, I think, is the way to get people to invest.
We only have a few minutes left, not really enough time to get into anything too deep, but I would love to ask, perhaps we could just go down the line, and if I could ask you to characterize the state of the child marriage problem in a few words, or in a few sentences? I know that's asking a lot.
Look, I would say it's grim because there are 12 million girls a year who are getting married, so that is terrible because every single one of them is a tragedy, without question. They're more likely to have children early, more likely to have children more frequently. They are less likely to be able to deal with gender-based violence. So each one is a tragedy. But we do know what to do, and I think the point you're making here is that it's very different in different places. Yes. I mean, there's not, education, I agree, I always say this too, if we can keep them in school longer, the longer we can push it off, the better. That is absolutely critical. But you need to be on the ground. Girls Not Brides is on the ground, we're on the ground. There are many local organizations all around the world who are working on this. They need to try to address the fundamental challenges that girls in those communities are facing, but we can do it. And I think the trick is, we know what to do, we just need to do it faster. And we need to do it more aggressively. And I think that requires countries to take the lead, right? And that's why, again, Sierra Leone's so important. They need to push. We all need to come behind and help them as much as we can. But we can do it.
Amen. Thank you. Faith.
I think the message for me is that we need more governments. Sierra Leone, you are leading the way, and there are others. We need more governments, especially governments in countries where the preference is high. We need leadership, we need presidents, we need first ladies, we need MPs, everybody at a position of leadership to speak out against this issue. Without that, we are not going to win this war. But we also need finances. I cannot stress that enough. We also need finances, and they need to come from both ways. They need to come from donor countries. They need to come from the countries themselves which are working, but we need to also work together because I'm a very glass half full kind of person. So I'm very optimistic that this is a solvable problem. We can solve this problem if we can all rise up and do our part. We all have a part to play. Even you sitting in this room, you have a part to play. Identify what that part is and go do it. If we all do that, I'm very optimistic we can end child marriage in our lifetime. That's how I look at this life.
Rachel, you want to take 30 seconds to weigh in before we have to
So I think this
up?
is a solvable problem, but I would encourage everyone here, often economists are seen as the bogeymen, and we should be seeing this from a rights perspective, but there is a huge amount of financial investment that is going into this and complicating it. So to bring in some economics when you think about the problem, because there's a lot under the surface going on.
That concludes our panel. Thank you all for your insights. Thank you for being here.
Welcome to the stage, Jennifer Klein.
Thank you. I would like to introduce two extraordinary champions in the fight against child marriage, Sheryl Sandberg and Dr. Fatima Maada. Sheryl Sandberg, the founder of Leone, is a leader committed to exposing the human as well as economic costs of child marriage and to finding the solutions to end this practice. We are deeply grateful to her for her support and dedication as the founder of this project at Columbia's Institute of Global Politics. Dr. Fatima Maada, you've heard a lot about her already, is the First Lady of the Republic of Sierra Leone and President of the Organization of African First Ladies for Development. She has used her platform incredibly successfully to advocate for an end to child marriage, both in Sierra Leone and across Africa. We're honored to have her here at Columbia and look forward to hearing her reflections and recommendations. Please welcome to the stage Sheryl Sandberg and the First Lady.
Well, it is an honor to be here in this room with such incredible people. Thank you to everyone at SIPA, to Karen and Rachel and Jen. Working with you is a dream. To our friends at CGD for the economic analysis. And we all, I say this all the time, but all of us stand on the shoulders of the great Hillary Clinton. Thank you. So I, like so many people in this room, I've had so many wonderful opportunities in my life to meet people that I admire, who have voice and strength and conviction. And I can honestly say of all of those people, I have never been more honored to sit next to someone as I am to sit next to this woman, who is not just the First Lady of Sierra Leone and the President of the Organization of African First Ladies, but is, in my view, one of the clearest and strongest voices of the morality and the cost of this issue. Thank you for your commitment, your leadership, and for flying all the way around the world to be with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So I want to start with you. I've had the great honor and privilege to get to know you a little bit and know your story, but I'm hoping you can share your story as we start this conversation.
I don't know if everybody have the energy to cry today. My name is Fatima Maada. Well, you have to use a title, right? I'm the First Lady of Sierra Leone. But before then, I was once a child, just like the children that we're fighting for right now. When people talk about early marriage or say, child marriage, for me, I think you're giving a title to something that is so bad. It is forced marriage. And I think the best title for it is legalized rape. Because if you're talking about, marrying a child at the age of 12, 13, a child who cannot take care of themselves, and who end up into a home that is loveless, they are not only sexually abused, but they end up becoming a slave. Because being there, I'm saying this out of experience, and when I campaign, the experience part is I saw all my sisters go through this. And when it was my turn, I knew exactly that this is the end of my life. And I saw my mother, a brave woman, shrink in herself because she could not save me or she could not protect me. And I saw a woman who the only thing she can do is when we had war, she asked me to run. Run to go where? A teenager. And the only person I've known is my mother. Of course, we do have our fathers, but are they always there? I don't know. But when it comes to a decision like this, they make that decision so confidently and so casually as if you don't matter at all. I was giving an example to my people. When they brought in my dowry for my wedding, you'll be surprised what they did to that dowry. I was the one who was supposed to be married. But my dowry was given to my stepbrother for him to travel to Germany and empower himself. And I was meant to go and be in that marriage. And I was supposed to be married to a man who I've known all my life as my uncle. I've called him uncle all my life. He comes to my house. I'm so happy to see him. And the day I was told that this is going to be your husband, the hatred I have for that man, I still carry that burden on me. That is how much I hated that man. And it took me a long time to even forgive my own father. And even now when I sit and then my father is around, I say these casual things like, oh God, I wonder if I was married to that man, whether my father would be sitting in a house like this. Because I needed to rub it in. It kills your dream. It's the child who sits at night while everyone else is sleeping. You cry and wake up in the morning and pretend like it's okay. You go to school, but you don't want to be there because there's no point of being in school. My mother was using school for me just to be able to keep me away from being in that man's bed. Basically, oh no, allow my daughter to at least do her GCSE. That's like common entrance for you to finish high school. That was my future. I just needed to finish high school and then I'm gone. They've eaten the dowry, they have decided on everything. And I'm not happy because war in every country is a disaster for everyone. But it was the war that saved me. If we didn't have the war, I would not be sitting here. And as I could remember now, this man is now Islamic scholar. And he stands in front of people and pray, and call prayer and pray them. And you think God will answer your prayer when you're a pedophile? But nobody talk about these things. The girls who are going through early marriage are going through the worst. And I can tell you there is no girl who goes through early marriage who will not want to kill herself. Even the thought of knowing that this is your future, this is the journey your life is going to be, you will want to kill yourself. You know, I wake up at the middle of the night and I cry myself to sleep. I wake up in the morning and I looked at my mom and I was wondering, why is she still in my father's house? Or why are you allowing this horrible thing to happen to me? You know, but then what can she do? My father will threaten her and say, well, if you don't allow her to be married, I'm going to divorce you. Am I going to be the reason why my mother will leave her home? My mother was married off my mother when she was 16. And that has been her life all throughout. And now it was my turn to be my mother. And she didn't know what to do. She didn't know how to save me. Like I said, when the war broke out in Sierra Leone and we were displaced, and the person who had the iron fist, who is my father, was not around, my mother said, run. And I just run. Run to where? Anywhere but wherever my father is, I will not go there.
Your personal journey got you all the way here, and now you've had one of the most effective and successful campaigns anyone has had to end child marriage, and you've approached it with a truly unique angle, which is not just making it against the law, but trying to enforce those laws. Can you talk about the steps you've taken in Sierra Leone and the results you've had?
The thing is, early marriage is a community duty. No one person, it's not something that is decided by one person. Everyone will know about it. So for me, if we really want to ban early marriage in a place like Sierra Leone, you have to make sure the penalty goes around everybody who will be involved. So if you attend the wedding, you are part of the problem. If you officiate the wedding, you are part of the problem. If you play music at the wedding, you are part of the problem, because you should be able to ask. Ask a question. That's why they said it takes a village to bring up a child. It should also take a village to protect that child. So the law we passed is not just for the perpetrators. It's not just against the mothers or fathers of the child. It's for everybody who dress up and look nice to go to that wedding of a child. Look on that picture now, everyone. Look at this girl. Even with the best makeup, she looks ugly because she wasn't happy. Marriage was supposed to be a happy day. And you expect me to believe that this girl was happy? And you expect me to believe when this girl was taken into that room and this pedophile had sex with her, she actually gave consent to that? I don't think so. So if you want to, like Faith is saying, get the whole community involved, everybody. And because of that today, I'm not saying it's not happening, but the only thing they will do is move to the next country, because of course we have borders with other countries, Guinea and Liberia, unless if you move to Guinea and then you go and do it and make sure you don't come back, because if you come back, we'll be waiting for you.
The issue all around the world of enforcing those laws is such a big issue, and that step, I remember when you first told me about it many months ago, of saying it's illegal for you to attend the wedding, and this is such an important part. It's on the person who attends to prove it.
Yeah, prove you're innocent.
That's right.
It has nothing to do with me. If you go there and you didn't ask question,
that's right.
Then when you go to court, you will explain why you were there. if you are the pastor or the imam who officiates that wedding without getting documents to show that this child is old enough to be married, you have to go prove it's not on me. The marriage happened. If the child come to any police station and make a report and that case goes to court, I don't have to prove anything. It is you that if they take you to court, you go and prove it yourself.
It's a legal framework that we all who have worked on this very much believe in and would like to see replicated. And you're not only the First Lady of your country, but you are the president of the Organization of African First Ladies. And I know you're working with that group on policy across the region. Can you talk to us about what the policies are that you would like to see the other countries implement, and how is that work progressing?
When I started this, in fact, I started when I introduced the Hands of Our Girls. I remember everyone saying to me, "Oh, that's a harsh title." I said, "Will that title be harsh than the pedophiles that will be raping our girls?" They said it's harsh. You really have to campaign and you really have to get everyone involved. You cannot do it in isolation. Our story is one that we are now, the world says, "Oh, Sierra Leone, Sierra Leone." That happened because we had a president who decided that enough is enough. We have a president who said, "You know what, if you touch any one girl, any one woman in this country, you'll have me to deal with." And the president wasn't joking. And all the taboo subjects that you don't want to talk about, from menstruation to early marriage to teenage pregnancy, everything, we have our president who championed every one of this campaign. Because we needed to do something. Our country was named as anything bad about sexual abuse in West Africa, Sierra Leone was like at the top of everything. And the president said, "You know what, it's going to stop here." And the worst thing is, before you can rape a girl, and then it depends who you are. If you are from an affluent family, they will actually smack you for allowing them to catch you. That's your punishment. "Oh, why do you allow them to know you did this?" Nothing comes out of it. But now, if you rape one child in Sierra Leone, you're going to jail for 15 years. And believe you me, we've sent so many pedophiles in jails right now. I'm enjoying it every day.
So you've said, and I'm so grateful for the clarity of your voice and the strength of your language, we must wake up, stand firm, and lead with purpose. As we conclude, what sustains you in standing firm? And what is your call to action for the people around the world?
Okay.
To end this practice that you call what it is, which is legalized.
Maybe my own story is different from most people around the world. When I championed this cause, for me, it was me fighting for Fatima at the age of 12. It's that Fatima. What I could have done if I had the opportunity when I was 12 years old is what I'm doing now. Is fighting for that Fatima that was looking for somebody to fight for her, and I didn't have one. Is that Fatima who was silenced and wanted to kill someone, but didn't have the right weapon to use. So I'm speaking for that Fatima. So every girl I see today, every girl that is going through any form of an abuse, from rape to early marriage, which is legalized form of rape for me, I just see that Fatima. And I don't do this because of how much money I'm going to raise. I do this because I believe that it is the right thing to do right now. And it's not, you don't say I take an oath for, but this is what I live for. We're going to fight as much as we can. And the good thing that has happened in Sierra Leone today, with all the policy changes, with all the things that the president has done, we have more girls in school, we have more retention in school. Before, by the time you get to from 5, from 6, I don't know what's that in America, of course, you're getting married. Now we have girls going to universities. We have girls finishing universities. In every public examination, the girls are leading on all public examination in Sierra Leone. We've moved from 30% retention to almost 80% retention in education for girls in Sierra Leone. And all of this All of this has happened in the last 5-6 years, and the campaign of the Hands Off Our Girls has gone on for the last 7 years, going 8. And myself and Mabel, we have run this world. We have screamed. We've like, it need to stop. No, 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 no. Because I don't want anybody trying to make this sound nice. It is not nice, most definitely. You know, so when I was invited to be part of this project, I'm saying to myself, you know what? I think that's the place I need to be. Because, you know, whatever America decides to champion, the world will listen. And today we have, our Honorable Hillary here, who is a voice that has ringed in my ears for so long. And I had somebody who puts together a comparison of myself and Hillary. And I looked at this comparison, I said, I think one of the only thing that we have as the common comparison is the fact that we are both very stubborn, you know? And I'm so, so grateful to be here today and knowing full well that, you know, the woman I've admired from afar is sitting next to me. I'm honored. I want to say thank you.
Well, I want to join everyone here in saying that I think everyone in this room joins me in our deep admiration for you. I think your voice added to this report is the single most important thing that could happen for this issue. It's an honor.
Thank you. And Faith, I know you keep saying, you know, please, if you know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody that has the money to make the work of people like Faith continue in our world, please help us. It will work. Thank you. Thank you so very much. I'm so honored.
Introducing Kakenya Intaya, founder and president of Kakenya's Dream.
I was engaged when I was 5 years old. I knew that my husband was waiting for me, that I would be married after going through female genital cutting. I knew that I didn't want to be like my mother, who was being abused by my father. When girls are forced into marriage, their education stops. They experience gender-based violence. They live in a life of poverty. I remember my best friend getting married when we were in 6th grade, and I felt pain in me seeing her getting married because I knew that was the end of our friendship. That was the end of her childhood. So I made a deal with my father that I can only go through female genital cutting if you allow me to go to school. I rallied the community. I promised the elders that if I go to get an education, I'll come back to help them. No girl should go through female genital cutting. No girl should drop out of school. No girl should be married. Every girl should be given an opportunity. So Kakenya's Dream is really about breaking the social norms, breaking the barriers, ensuring that they don't go through female genital cutting, ensuring that they don't go through FGM and they don't go through child marriages. They are children, and we need to value that.
Welcome to the stage, moderator Rachel Vogelstein, Nyana Chowdhury, Lucy Kluva, and joining virtually Obi Ezekwesili and Rebecca Gyumi.
Okay, so we have talked this afternoon about the cost of inaction on child marriage, and we've just heard such a powerful account of the importance of political will and leadership in addressing this issue. Now we're going to turn to the way forward and discuss what practices work best to end child marriage and why. And we have a terrific panel of experts to enlighten us. Thank you all for being here. Dr. Kluver, let's start with you. You researched at Oxford which practices are the most cost-effective to address child marriage. And the report we've released today suggests that making progress in this moment of austerity really requires doubling down on the most cost-effective approaches: investing in education, investing in health services to reduce adolescent pregnancy, shifting some of the harmful social norms that we've heard about this afternoon. What does your research show with respect to the interventions that work the best, and why?
Well, it's not just our research, it's a global movement of research. And when you read this, you'll see it has 17 pages of citations to show it. But we've really learnt three key things. The first is that for the first time in history, we have solutions to end child marriage. And we don't just have one solution, we have a set of really effective solutions that can be combined in different ways, in different contexts, to get it right. The second thing that we've learned is that when you provide those solutions, you don't just end child marriage. This is an economic model. We've spared you the 70 pages of algebra behind it. An economic model built in Nigeria on a program developed and delivered by the Center for Girls' Education, a local Nigerian-based NGO. And what we see is that the provision of safe spaces and education support, when it's targeted at the right girls at the right time, results not only in prevention of child marriage, but in massive benefits to their education, to their health, and the health of their children, to violence prevention. And then that leads to the third thing. The third thing is that when we do that, it doesn't just help those girls or their children. It substantially boosts the local economy. We see a $494 million return on a $100 million investment just in wage returns alone of those girls who have not become child brides, but who have become a growing middle class.
That is powerful research. You mentioned Nigeria. Dr. Obi, I want to turn to you next. As Nigeria's Minister of Education, you've championed girls' education. You later co-founded the Bring Back Our Girls movement. What do you think is needed to improve girls' education in places where child marriage prevalence is still high? And why is education so critical to ending this practice?
Thank you so very much. And apologies that I couldn't join you all in New York. I'm at a church camp meeting, so you can say my background reflects that I'm in camp. I want to say that number one thing we have seen at least in Nigeria and of much of Africa, where 4 out of every 10 girls are ending up in child marriage, a terrible number, is that education for everyone is a generalized approach. And that is not helping the girls in the conversation on prioritization of education. And therefore, the more that the conversation has gone toward evidence of what works, in order for education to not just be a social construct, but an endeavor that supports the contribution of all of society to its growth and development. We have then seen a more specific angle to the necessity for girls to be given a deliberate attention. And what we have also seen is that just education, meaning schooling, is not sufficient. Learning outcomes are important, both for the boys and for the girls. But data is showing that learning outcomes are actually lower for girls. And therefore, we do need to give particular attention to grades 1, 2, and 3, when the child really needs to have those foundational skills that are predictors of what life will eventually be for them. And so when it comes to the matter of how we use education to delay marriage and to enhance the incentive for families to send their children to school, their girls to school, we would have to think of the agenda setting for the topic. The agenda setting for the matter of girls in school is often left to a few NGOs, well-meaning, and just carrying the card, when in fact, we now have to change this whole conversation by making it a political campaign issue. Girls' education, ending child marriage can no longer be marginal to the agenda setting for political parties. We have to understand that when we talk about unlocking the data of the population of women in African societies, we have to be strategic about it. We unlock this in order to make sure that the political system is responding to the kind of data. This evidence is not enough for those of us that care about the issue. We really need to ram it down the heads of everyone who needs to do the right thing. And by the way, and ancillary to what I've just said, is the fact that this masculine definition of political power is something that now needs to begin to get targeted attention by those of us that care about ending child marriage. Because, for example, in my country, the people you're preaching to are the culprits. So even when you've got legislation, they don't execute. They don't care to consider that law as something that they are subject to, because yes, they are above the law. The systems that are not as strong and effective as what you would see in other systems, in other mature systems, will of course be subject to the whims and caprices of those with the political power, which is why we must engage in political inclusion, unlock the data of women, get more women elected, get them into parliament, get them into the government houses, get them, it's wonderful that I see the First Lady trying to push, but the truth is, to an extent to which they can, they need to stop only being First Ladies. We need to have them becoming presidents. Women have to be presidents. Women have to be parliamentarians, because then they can set the agenda. They are no longer standing on the gates. Why should we continue to stand at the gates of the parliament in front of the president's office campaigning for an issue that shouldn't be campaigned for? Anyone with any mindset toward development and society that functions should immediately know that it's important for girls to go to school, not to be on the bed of a man that is a licious old man that has no business touching a child. So,
Dr. Obi talked about political power. Rebecca, I want to ask you about the power of law. In 2019, you achieved a landmark legal victory when the Court of Appeals in Tanzania declared child marriage to be illegal. How did you build momentum for this case? And how important is legal reform to reducing rates of child marriage?
Thank you very much. You pardon me if my voice is a little bit shaky. Almost 2 a.m. where I'm at. But I think it's a testimony of how committed we are to this cause and to this conversation actually happening. So maybe a little bit of background. In Tanzania, 14.9 million children are girls, but 1 out of 3 marry before they're 18, and 1 in 4 bear a child, or they get a child before their 18th birthday. So when we founded the Msichana Initiative, our vision at that time was very clear: centering girls' voice, power, and leadership, so girls can determine their own future. But at that time, we realized that the Law of Marriage Act in Tanzania allowed girls to marry as young as 14 with court consent and 15 with parent consent. And we knew with the simple fact that as long as the law itself legitimized child marriages, social change was difficult to be achieved. Most likely we will be faced with resistance. And you cannot tell communities that child marriage is harmful while you have a whole law that permits it. So it was very, very important as young women at that time championing for the end of child marriage in our country to really look at the role of legal framework, not just in banning child marriages, but setting the right tone on what is allowed and what is not allowed when it comes to issues of child marriage, but also provide pathways for access to justice. So what actually helped us create momentum at that time was to ground our litigation, our strategic litigation, on the lived realities of girls. We worked with survivors of child marriages from the hotspots regions in Tanzania. They were part of our story. They were part of our petition. They worked the court journey with us. And that really strengthened our voice because it was grounded. It was not just passionate young women advocates who are enraged with this issue that is happening in the community, but it was really showcasing that this is a real issue in our communities, and we have real lived examples of girls whose lives were cut short or whose dreams were cut short because they are not able to realize their full potential just because their parents or their elders in the family decided that it was time for them to get married. The second thing that helped us create momentum was to anchor our petition in the constitutional provisions. Because many times when you talk about child marriage, we look at it as just a gender issue. No, but it's an equality and also, I would say, a dignity issue. When you look at constitutional rights and, for instance, the Tanzania Constitution that provides for non-discrimination, and it's very clear that, you know, any provision or any law that is discriminatory is unconstitutional. We wanted to also send a very clear message that this was not just a gender equality issue, it was also a constitutional issue. And we are happy that, you know, our Court of Appeal, which is like our Supreme Court, I would say, in the US, ruled in favor of girls that truly this law was unconstitutional because it was discriminatory. While the minimum age for girls was 14, the minimum age for boys was 18. But we also created alliances and coalition because I think, like previous speakers shared, you can never bring change alone. You need people, you need communities around you. So we had to partner with legal experts, with civil society actors, with research institutions and think tanks, gender advocates, because we know our power was in our collective. And the more, you know, many of us, like, you know, you have the critical mass that is behind this issue, the more we were able to actually ensure this agenda becomes a priority agenda when it comes to the discourse of our country. We also combine the court work with pedagogical pursuit. And I would like to emphasize on this because many times when we are pursuing strategic litigation, we tend to think public interest cases as just something that happens in the courtroom and then it's just a case we have filed. For us, it was very important as the case was ongoing to combine that with education to the community that, you know, they needed to understand what was happening and then why was this issue important, but also rally them behind the case. So that in essence, the momentum for us really came from making the case a national conversation and limiting it from not just being a legal filed case or something that happened in the courtroom and then no one actually understands what is happening with the case. And I would say to your case on what we think on the role of a legal framework when it comes to the Ending Child Marriage campaign, I would say legal framework is foundational. but it is not sufficient. But it is also very, very important. It's foundation. I think it's evident, like what we have heard from the First Lady. You know, when you have a legal proclamation that bans or prohibits child marriages, in essence, you have a very clear declaration that as a country, we are not going to allow child marriages. And then that becomes so easy for you when you have advocacy in the community, advocacy at national level, to have a huge backing on, you know, your messages and what you're saying is allowed or not allowed. So legal framework is important because it sets national standard, and I think that's very, very important. But as I said, alone is not enough, but still it's critical to have legal framework in place. At the same time, I think also it provides legal justification as to why we are saying child marriages is a violation of human rights. So child marriages actually denies girls an opportunity to realize their full potential. And the last one for me, I think, is also creation of accountability mechanism for enforcement and pathways for girls to access justice, which is very, very, very important. So I think when I look at our journey with the strategic litigation, especially in Tanzania, I would say it is like opening the door. But the real work actually is in ensuring girls are able to pass through that door, because that's then an entirely different work. You open the door, yes, but are we supporting girls to actually not being married, or do we have alternatives when community's only alternative for girls is being married? I think that has been our critical question, and maybe in the come up discussion, I'll talk a little bit more on maybe what more can we do around that area.
Thank you, Rebecca. Nyana, let's turn to you. Your organization, Breakthrough, is focused on making forms of gender-based violence unacceptable by transforming cultural norms, by opening that door that Rebecca just talked about. And your work is focused in India, which is home to the largest number of child brides in the world. We know that changing social norms is complex. It can take years, even decades. Can you give us an example of where your approach has led to measurable change and why?
Thank you, Rachel. And when I was listening to Rebecca, I felt that that's the best segue to get into my section, because we work on that. We work on opening that door and holding girls there so that they can see a very different world from what they have been shown. I would start with myself. I come from a very small industrial town of east of India, and I'm probably the only girl from my classroom of 45 girls who has come out, and I do not want me to be an exception. I want all the 45 girls to be able to become a Fatima, Secretary Clinton, Sheryl, Mabel, or Faith, yeah? So that's the world that Breakthrough dreams of, and for us, it's not enough that girls do not get married at 18. It is much more important to create an alternative vision of what they can be in the world, which is not segregated by gender-biased norms. Yeah? In a world which is not segregated by gender-biased norms, it is not about at least the girl stays in school, but at best what she can be. Yeah? That's the world that we try to work on. So Breakthrough has works with almost 100,000 adolescents at any given point in time directly with a gender attitude change curriculum. And we see that in about 4 states which are most gender regressive in the country, in 13 districts, girls are really pushing for aspirations, dreams. They are talking about careers. They have plans. So if you come and talk to our girls, they are going to talk about, this is my plan A, and this is my plan B. And I think that even today, I don't have a plan B. Yeah, most of you may have, but our girls already have plan Bs. But when we started, they did not have a role model. They did not have people in their families which they could look up to become something like them. So our work has been to be able to make them dream, to be able to look at role models and become role models themselves. By working with this, we have been able to push the age of marriage by 1 year, 11 months. Yeah? And that's a work of 5 years. And it's in a very large area and in spite of COVID, right? We were expecting a much greater result, but COVID came in between, and all of you talked about the push that happened. I also wanted us to remember that 30 million girls fell out of education due to COVID. And that's where we thought that aspiration is the only way to go. Come COVID or no COVID, come rain, come shine, girls will be in school if they have an aspiration to go somewhere far, and that's where they will be. Yeah.
Incredibly important work. Dr. Kluver, I want to turn back to you and ask if you can drill down on what's really needed to put the strategies we recommend in the report into practice. You've advised governments and UN agencies on programs and policies to reduce child marriage. What do you think is needed from governments, from multilateral organizations, from civil society partners to accelerate the pace of change?
Well, I think fundamentally they just need to understand what the evidence is saying, which is one clear thing, that adolescent girls are our greatest unrealized asset. Now, that asset is at risk. This is new research by Bathena Eltijani, about to be published in the Lancet Planetary Health. If you could bring up the slide, it would even help. But what it finds is that in situations of climate change, of drought, we're seeing a doubled rate of sexual violence against adolescent girls. So the risk is rising, but the potential is also rising. We're seeing with population change that there will be, by 2050, 500 million girls in Africa. That 500 million girls does contain the next Sheryl Sandberg, the next Hillary Clinton, the next Faith Mwangi Powell. And we just have to make that investment at the right time so that they can be realized. We can also see that we can actually reach that billion. We now know that with new data, new capacity to drive down the costs of interventions, not all interventions, but some, we can see this is an example of a study about to be published, which shows a major randomized control trial in Rebecca's home country of Tanzania, which drove down the cost of an evidence-based violence prevention parenting program from $60 to $6 and resulted in outcomes which can save the government substantial amounts of money. This is in a government's interest. But we also see that we can have combined effective investments. This is an extraordinary example. This is an economic model led by Rutgard, Obiesi, and Desmond that the Kenyan government and UNICEF and the World Bank used to effect a $20 million IDA loan and a $20 million SIF grant, which allowed a set of carefully selected interventions, which resulted in a set of outcomes which will give a 6-to-1 return on investment for that government. Now, some people believe in child rights and girls' rights, and some don't. But whether you do or you don't, this is the investment that we need to be making.
Thank you for that. It's really powerful research, and we highlight the important work that you've done in the report, given the returns that you have demonstrated we're able to see from investments. Rebecca, I want to come back to you You talked about the importance of the law, and you've also talked about how entrenched social norms can undermine it. So how can we write policies in a way that protects girls, and what kinds of programs are most effective to realize the full promise of the law? What have you seen in Tanzania?
Thank you so much. I think what I have seen, especially in relationship to how social norms, for instance, have shaped the implementation of the Court of Appeal ruling, is Tanzania, I believe, like many African countries, is still very patriarchal. So issues like marriage, for instance, or decisions to be married or not, are normally made by male elders and male relatives. Girls do not have voice to actually decide when they want to get married and with whom they want to get married. And I think what we're also seeing is child marriage is a gender norms issue. You have power relations, socialization, and interest that decides on girls and girls' future. And many times, girls do not have a voice to decide, whether they want to be married or they don't want to be married. But what we're also seeing is in the context of poverty, and I think even previous speakers talked about it, many times marriage is actually viewed as a strong alternative to reduce the burden to families. When families do not have a clear pathway, and sometimes, I don't know, I also get hard time to reason around the poverty issue, because I think the feminist in me actually says, I think the poverty is just an excuse, because in the same family that is poor, a girl will be married, but a boy will be sent to school. I think if poverty was an issue, we would have seen maybe different. We wouldn't have seen different choices for the same children who are coming from the same household, and that's why I think as we speak, it's very important that we also don't forget to center that child marriage is a gender norms issue. Girls are married young because they're girls, because our communities do not value girls. The belief and the attitude around girls' potential and what they're able to do is actually, unfortunately, very poor in many of our communities. So that results into sometimes community thinking the best alternative is to marry them off, or if they're pregnant, then they can just be at home. But the last thing that I also wanted to share, what we are observing when it comes to the implementation of the legal framework in relationship to the norms, is child marriages in our community is also tied to traditional practices, such as female genital mutilation, but also we see social status, which are traditional practices in many of our communities. Once this rite of passage is conducted, a girl is deemed fit to be married. And so sometimes it pushes the girls into early marriages. What I would actually commend as best approaches or interventions when it comes to social norms, first one is what we have been implementing in the organization I've founded, which I feel has really, really worked. Combining strategies. We believe girls do not live on an island. They're surrounded by people. They are surrounded by communities. And these communities are the ones that shapes these attitudes, norms that end up disadvantaging girls. So if you want to influence girls' lives, you have to also work with communities that surround girls. But you also have to work with girls themselves. So almost like a combination of strategies, working with communities and working with girls at the same time. And with girls, we have been working on enhancing their agents through the girls' clubs that we run in school, using card games. But we also have some incentives, especially for girls who walk long distance to school. We provide them with bicycles, and we've seen that really, really working. But we are working with government to also support girls who drop out for different reasons, including pregnancy, to return to school. So having like re-entry policy where really the pathway for girls is saying, go back to school. But I also agree with Mama Obiageli that education for us should also not just end on saying girls are accessing education. We also need to question, are they learning when they're in school? Because that then becomes a critical question. But also the schools that they are going to, are they safe? That also becomes a very critical conversation, because evidence also shows us if schools are not safe, then you just be, transferring the problem. They are not at home, but, they are being violated at school. And the last one, in terms of intervention that I would like to share, is working with traditional leaders, traditional and religious leaders. With the religious leaders, for instance, in Tanzania, we have worked with the interfaith group, which engages religious leaders from different sects. And what we have seen is them actually trying to translate their religious scriptures and relate it to child marriages. And that has been very helpful and as an instrument to actually go back to the community and use that as a tool to raise awareness. But on traditional leaders, I think it's the same, because these are gatekeepers. And here, I think I would like to also highlight the late Senior Chief Teresa Kanjinamoto. She's not from Tanzania, but I think these are some of good examples from Africa that we've seen. They have been working. As a traditional leader, best known as the terminator of child marriages, she single-handedly terminated more than 3,500 child marriages. And I think that demonstrates that when you work with traditional leaders and when they understand the issue, they can be champions. And here, I think also highlighting the Council of Traditional Leaders of Africa, COTLA, which have also seen engaging in different issues, including the child marriage issue. During the COVID, they were also quite instrumental. They gave out a commitment as Traditional Leaders Coalition in Africa, saying they will be there to defend girls and women against gender-based violence. So I think these are all practical examples of what is actually happening when it comes to working with society, working with community in a way that supports community to change attitude, but at the same time create mechanisms that protect girls. I think what I would like to wind off with there is we should also not forget that norms, as we're speaking of social norms are not static. They can change. So, of course, unlike maybe laws that, you can get a win overnight or after a few years, social norms, maybe they take time. But I believe with continuous engagement, long-term investment, we'll be able to work with communities to shift their mindset and attitude and support girls to thrive. Thank you.
So we've heard from Dr. Kluver about the return on investment from many of these programs. Rebecca, you've talked about many of the interventions that are most effective. Dr. Obi, I want to turn back to you to talk about how we raise the resources that are needed to truly address this problem. The report we've released today calls for an investment of $1.3 billion over 5 years, which would effectively reduce the rate of child marriage, we estimate, from 1 in 5 girls married under the age of 18 globally to 1 in 7. You, in addition to your public service, advise the Children's Investment Fund Foundation, CIF, which is a leading philanthropy focused on this issue. Can you talk to us about the role of philanthropy and the private sector, which has come up already in the discussion today, in terms of meeting this $1.3 billion target?
Yes, I think that it is very clear that domestic mobilization of resources by governments it will take time. Not only will it take time, it is in fact the case that most of the countries, even if optimized domestic mobilization because of the fragile growth that you see in those economies. There's not something significant, statistically significant, that would support the kind of prioritization of budget for education, especially, as I said, foundational learning for girls, because it can determine whether they in fact will go on to secondary education, which is where we are able to get them to avoid becoming immediate brides at an age that is ridiculous. And so tying all of that together means that we have to mobilize resources from philanthropies, domestic and international. More of African philanthropies have to show up. The fact that the global reality.
I fear that we may have lost our connection, but the point stands, which is that there are many actors that need to be at the table to generate the resources we need, and the returns on that investment, Dr. Kluver, as you pointed out, are profound. Nyana, you talked about your work with over 2 million adolescents, young people around the world between the ages of 11 and 25, and the work that you do to help shape beliefs before they solidify into norms. Tell us why focusing on young people is so important as we think about pursuing solutions to this problem.
Oh, wow. Adolescents and young people, what does come to your mind? Questions, right? Yeah, I can see some smiles in the room. Many of you are handling adolescents at home, and you know how difficult they are. And they are always going to ask questions. They are not going to just listen to you and do whatever you are asking them to. Even in the most repressive of environments, they are our only hope. Because I'm in a very learned room, I can talk about how the synapses are building and they're pruning, and that's the best time to give them new ideas so that they understand new methods of looking at things, new types of critical lenses. But at the same time, if we talk in very common parlance, it's about making a generational shift. You're trying to build a generation which is not going to accept child marriage, which is not going to accept gender-based violence, which is not going to accept that I will be given as a boy a full glass of milk and my sister is not going to be given that. I will be allowed to play, but my sister will not be allowed to play. We want a whole generation to shift, and hence young people are our only hope, and we are seeing great results in that too.
So I wonder, as we close, if I can ask each of you, what is the message that you want to leave with the young people in this audience today? We have many students who are future policymakers. What do you want them to prioritize as we think about addressing this issue? Dr. Kluver?
Shall we let our colleagues online?
Let's try. Dr. Obi, can you come in on what message you have for the young policymakers with us? Oh. Dr. Obi, we can't hear you.
I have unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we hear you now.
My internet is so choppy. my internet is so choppy. I'm sorry.
No problem. Please go ahead.
So number one thing is political courage. This is going to take a lot of political courage. And so we've got to have the young people who are facing a different world, a world in which there is a greater sense that we must unlock all potentials, to have the political courage to say child marriage has to end. Simple, period. No ifs, no whatabouts, no ifs, none of that. It has to end. It's a menace. We can't tolerate it into the next decade of our lives. So political courage is number one. Number two is coalition building. They must build coalition. Like I was saying earlier, philanthropies within the continent, as well as outside of the continent, and then private sector that understands how, in fact, some data is showing up that private sector is saying that female participation in labor is actually a net benefit to their bottom line. They have to be at the table. We need to build those kinds of coalitions, and policymakers can be the glue that bring people together. And then the other thing is the incentive alignment. All the actors in this conversation have one incentive they are chasing or the other. Or we, in fact, introduce disincentive. There has to be a disincentive for political leaders to sit in countries that have high levels of child marriage and are sitting pretty and coming to global organizations or global forums and speaking. We should be targeting those kinds of leaders and saying, you left at home girls who are being married off at such young age and you're pontificating on the global platform. No, this is not allowable. So, more transparency on what this is doing to different societies. Transparency in terms of budget that should go to matters that reduce it, and like what we said about education, social protection, livelihood support, the skills for jobs, and all of those aspects of budgeting that we need to prioritize. And then, of course, we do need citizens' oversight. The accountability for this will not happen by just the few of us that care about this. All of society has to be mobilized. All of society has to say, enough of this menace. We can't live with this anymore. I don't think we're outraged enough. And the reason that we're not outraged enough is that middle-class families don't have their children being married off. This is indexed to poverty. And when we see this and we turn a blind eye on it, we're complicit. So we've got to mobilize all of society and say, how do we sit on our feet or on our whatever and allow children to literally be forgotten by society? Because that's what happens when we don't do something. And so I want to critically just say that the acceleration agenda would need to ensure that we're giving universal access to lower and upper secondary education to girls by ensuring that at the foundational level, they are not falling through the cracks. When girls are not achieving skills, they are very quick to leave the school system. We don't want that happening. So we must do something to insulate them against that. We need to ensure that universal birth registration systems exist. They are lying about the age of some of the girls just to, trample on the existing legislation. We do need to have predictable, scalable social protection for vulnerable households with girls. They are forgotten. These generalized subsidy arrangements don't help girls. They don't help women. We need to be more targeted in the way that we're using evidence to inform our policy choices. And then the agency building programs and safe spaces for girls. They work, actually. I'm on the board of SHOFCO in Kenya. It is one of the things that's working in terms of, helping girls to just not be captive to this early marriage. Public scorecards and budget transparency mechanisms are important. We need to do that. Policymakers need to, we actually almost like we need to develop some academy that policymakers come to learn the dangers of losing the productivity that could come from ensuring that the girls are not falling through the cracks into marriage. How can a child be giving back to a child? It's sacrilegious. We shouldn't we shouldn't agree with that. And my final point is that the coordinated architecture that really connects all of what we've been saying. It connects education with justice, with health, with finance, and the health systems. That has to be so. We cannot operate in silos with child marriage issue. It's a scourge, and it needs to end. I think that we have the power to end this. If women are outraged enough around the world by building what I call a big tent of the outraged, we can make this end. We need a big tent, a massive big tent, bringing all people together to say enough is enough. In fact, enough is finally now enough. I thank you very much.
Dr. Obi, thank you for those marching orders. We are running out of time, so I am going to thank our panelists. There's clearly a lot of work to do, but all of you have helped illuminate the path forward. So before we turn to our closing speaker, please join me in a round of applause.
Welcome to the stage, Mabel van Oranje.
Thank you very much. Before I share a few closing remarks, I would like to say a word of thanks to the people who have made this possible. Because this work is of tremendous importance, and without Sheryl's commitment, Hillary's commitment, Karen's commitment, especially Rachel and Jen and Kahinde, but also my fellow advisory council members and Memory, the fellow co-chair, and all the teams behind these amazing people, we would not be here today. So I would like to ask for a huge round of applause for all of them. Now, for me, my journey on trying to work to end child marriage started in March 2010, exactly 16 years ago. And I remember learning about child marriage and starting to work on it. And I remember the enormous amount of people who came to me and said, don't do it. This issue is too big, the drivers are too complex, the solutions are too complex, don't do it. And I'm the kind of person that if you tell me not to do something that looks like a huge injustice, I actually get extremely determined to try to make a difference. And knowing that we can all make a difference, but nobody can do it alone, we built this enormous coalition of people and organizations working together. And look where we are 16 years later. The rate has gone down from 1 out of every 4 girls getting married to 1 out of every 5 girls getting married. And as we heard today, we know what the solutions are and what needs to get done. And now, for the coming years, we have an amazing guide in telling us what comes next. And having, helped to produce this product and being very familiar with the messages in it, but also listening today to the amazing things we learned, I would like to kind of wrap this up by sharing 4 strategic recommendations. And they're short, and they're simple, and they're critical. Number 1, investing in girls is a smart thing to do. And if we want to go from 1 in every 5 girls getting married to 1 in every 7, it only takes $1.3 billion a year. Now, you might say that's an enormous amount of money. But if we look at the enormous cost of not doing anything, the economic costs, we learned about it, productivity, health, etc., this is peanuts. And so the economic argument is there, and we cannot and should not longer ignore it. Secondly, it is very clear that governments of countries, and there are many countries where we have high rates of child marriage, do need to take the lead. They need to commit, and they need to show, as was said, the courage. And so one of the things that we all need to do now, and because we've seen, like in Sierra Leone, when governments lead, what can happen? So we need to make sure that this report and all the arguments in it end up in the hands of presidents, first ladies, or first men, where we have female presidents, ministers of finance, ministers of education, ministers of health, ministers of gender, And not only at the state level, but also at lower levels of government. Because we know that governments can help to create change at a scale that is truly transformative for girls. Third strategic recommendation is that we need to invest to make sure that our money goes where it makes the biggest difference. Education, health, social norm change. It's very clear, so let's invest there. And this is, I think, also where the work that has been done by the Center for Global Development and also by the Accelerator Hub is going to give us really useful guidance in understanding how to turn $1 into $2, into $4, into $6 of output. And my last strategic recommendation is that we need to align and we need to coordinate. Because we can all make a difference, but nobody can do it alone. Yes, the role of governments is absolutely critical, but in the end, change happens in the lives of the girl, her family, and her community. And so we need the girls to get engaged and her brothers to get engaged. We need the parents to get engaged and the teachers to get engaged. We need to get the religious leaders to get engaged, the traditional leaders to get engaged, the local levels of government to get engaged, the big levels of government, the donors, government donors, private donors, UN agencies. When we all work together smartly, we can make true magic happen for girls. And that is what we, I think, are supposed to do. And so we need to work together and make sure that we then kind of have a clear strategy where we want to go, that we define our common goals, and that we then meaningfully and smartly coordinate what we're doing so that we build on each other's activities. So, as you go home, I hope that you will think about if we can all make a difference, but nobody can do it alone, think about what you can do. And as we bring this to a close, let me remind you, this is a human rights issue, it's a development issue, it's an economic issue. It might look like a challenging issue that requires big numbers, but in the end of all of this is a personal issue. And so I would like to ask each and every one of you, think about somebody in your lives who is an adolescent girl or a young woman. I'll think of my 2 daughters. And think about what we wish for them, the investments we make in them, the love we give them, the futures that we hope that they can realize. Now, the reality is that in 2026, we live in a world where geography still defines destiny and deprives girls, if they happen to be born in the wrong place, it deprives girls of opportunity. That's not okay, and that's not necessary. So what I truly hope is that the same dreams and hopes we have for the girls who are close to our heart, that we can realize those hopes and dreams and happy futures for every girl in the world, regardless of where she's born. Let's work together to make sure that every girl anywhere in the world can be a girl and not a bride. Thank you.